Well, with a 30% duty set to take effect on August the 7th, the highest rate in sub-Saharan Africa, that is, South Africa's key industries, from automobiles to agriculture, are bracing for severe disruptions. The tariffs, which were announced by US President Donald Trump, threaten to undo decades of trade benefits under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which previously allowed duty-free access for over 6,000 South African products. Khulekani Mathe, South African, who is part of Business Unity South Africa, the CEO, joins us to discuss the implications. Khulekani, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it this morning, Mr. Mathe. One might ask how serious we should take this, not because it just comes from the United States, but because they've been on again, off again for such a long time, these tariffs.
Good morning, Arabile, and to your viewers. I think we should take it very seriously. The United States of America is one of South Africa's largest trade partners, in fact, the second largest trade partner. And so any disruption in trading with that market is going to have a devastating impact. And so we should take it seriously.
Yeah, in taking it seriously, though, what can we then do? Because it doesn't seem as though the conversation is symbiotic, as in we're listening to each of the other sides. And it doesn't feel like there's a fair chance to actually get our story through. What can South Africa do?
Well, look, firstly, I think we support the stance taken by the South African government not to embark on a tariff of its own, imposing a tariff of its own against or retaliatory tariffs, as they call it, against the United States, because that would just have a devastating impact on South Africa. We're just too small an economy to try and fight with the United States. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think that negotiating is the only chance we have, really putting forward a case that explains, firstly, how trade between our two countries benefit both countries and not one country. But secondly, to really work through the details of what the US demands from us. I do not suppose that the United States expect us to accede to every single one of those. And I don't have the full list, but I think demonstrating that actually we hear you and we're willing to move on some issues, let's continue working on others which may be more difficult. I think that would be a demonstration of goodwill, which could then lead to one of a few possibilities, one being a lowering of the tariffs or a suspension of the coming into effect of the 30% tariffs while we work through a proper deal. So we do have to continue working at this, and we do have to put forward a deal that responds to some of what they demand, even if it's not everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's just some of the things that are indeed wanted from us then could ultimately include that case we have against Israel then in the ICJ. If we start making concessions like that, do we not begin to lose our own sovereignty and what it is we stand for as a country? And the business community then begins to look at us slightly differently.
Look, I think we can only speculate here. I have not seen the demands of the US in specific terms to South Africa. Yes, the issues around our case in the ICJ has been mentioned, but I think working through the list, I mean, the part of at the heart of this, not just with South Africa, but with all other countries where tariffs have been imposed, is what the Trump administration calls a fair trade environment, where they believe that they're not getting a fair deal in the trade relations that they have with different countries, where, for instance, they are now having a trade deficit with those countries. So we could start by looking at what lines of products we can make concessions on. And then there are some, as I understand it, other sort of non-trade barriers that they are concerned about, where we can start to make some concessions without necessarily conceding on some of the issues that are at the heart of our foreign policy.
Yeah, I mean, definite on this list is the exemption of USA entities from all black economic empowerment requirements. That's the same issue we had with Starlink and Elon Musk, of course, as well. How do we make sure that the implications of business in South Africa is still run the way South Africans wish to run it and not dictated to by a power like the United States? Because if the US can do it and we then change our ways, so many others may do and request the same.
He may well be one of those issues on the list, but and in my view, perhaps one of those that we would ask for a bit more time to work on with the United States. But there are a few others where I think, especially the kind of market access type issues, where we can begin to make goodwill concessions on without conceding on some of the big ones, and then work out a mechanism of how we respond to the concerns that they have. By the way, as things stand, our BEE laws allow for what is called equity equivalent investment. In other words, where a foreign company is not necessarily required to give part of its a stake in its company to a South African black partner, but where it can make an investment which is called an equity equivalent. So that already exists in our law. We can look at how that we make that framework more palatable to the US without necessarily having to change or ditch our legislation. So there are ways around this, and we just need to work at it. We need to talk to our US counterparts about ways that demonstrate that we're listening and we want to make things easy for them without necessarily giving our soul away, as it were.
So you're not suggesting we go to the World Trade Organization and start complaining and throwing our toys out the cart and saying, well, the US is treating us unfairly, the World Trade Organization needs to do something about this?
I mean, to the extent that there is a violation of WTO rules, we may do that. But if you think about it, what the U.S. administration or the Trump administration is doing is kind of rewriting the trade rule book, as it were. And so I don't think that will have much effect. In any event, the U.S. is not part of the WTO, is not a signatory to the WTO. And so I don't think that will have much effect. I think actually investing a lot of time and working through the issues with the United States, hard as it is probably what is going to get us a better deal. And of course, as everybody has said, also looking at ways in which we can diversify our export markets.
How many businesses do you expect to perhaps see liquidation because of this? I mean, a rise in liquidations could be happening because trade becomes a lot more difficult, a lot more pricier, and the margins were already small, and now they're going to go into the black.
It's hard to say, Arabile, but as you saw in one of the weekend newspapers saying that one company has lost a 750 million rand deal. So that is just the sort of impact that our small economy just cannot handle. And so it's going to be tough. We look forward with anticipation at the support package that the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition has spoken about, the details of that, because for that to really have a meaningful effect, it should be equivalent to the value of the 30% that we are suddenly going to be slapped with when it comes to the US market.
We've been having this conversation around AGOA, and of course, seemingly it is gone. Is there any point in having the conversation around AGOA later this year?
Well, I think until it is completely, gone, there is still, I think, merit in raising the issue of AGOA and what AGOA means for the African continent in terms of the impact it has on the economy, jobs on the African continent, as well as how it has supported the United States as well. So I think we should continue doing that, but as you say, indications are that the Trump administration is not really interested in AGOA because as far as they are concerned, a deal like that is what has led to, for instance, the unbalanced trade that it has with some of the economies on the continent, especially the South African economy.